Hey folks, welcome back to the VRNation Station podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hansen. Today I have a friend of mine, Amber Knight from Bookings Cloud. Amber, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
So, interestingly enough, we had a little bit of conversation before, and I am very, very interested, especially in the machine learning aspect, but I think a lot of people don't really fully understand what Bookings Cloud does. And why don't you just give a little bit about yourself and then maybe a little bit about Bookings Cloud, and then let's just jump into the topics.
Yeah, really, I run Bookings Cloud, and I've been part of the vacation rental industry for probably over a decade now. And really what I've done, I think, throughout my career is how do I help local vacation rental managers innovate in their market? How do I help them build more resilient businesses? What are the technologies that we can adapt from other markets and bring those to the vacation rental industry? So doing that, I'm going to say I have Vacasa, which is holistic listing, revenue management, pricing, just full go-to-market strategies, and then moving through doing revenue management and other strategic work at Inhabit and Rented. And so now I'm creating Bookings Cloud here. And essentially what we're doing is to say, how do we use all the data a vacation rental manager has in their PMS about their properties and about their rates and everything else? And how do we leverage all of the knowledge that Google and Meta have about our guests and the people who want to book those properties? And how do we essentially train those algorithms to understand these properties and drive qualified guests directly to the property detail page on their website? And that's what we do. We drive demand.
Excellent. So I think, it's one of those when I look at property managers and how they go about doing business, right? So, when we talk about aligning business goals with market conditions, as an example, like when a property manager first looks at their data, which KPI, which key performance indicator, would you say is really what they should be focused on? And it's actually showing actual growth opportunities. I think that's something that a lot of people really don't understand. And when they start getting these cool bells and whistles and tools, they're not quite sure what to focus in on. So, like, what do you tell people? What's the first thing they should really focus in on?
One of the things I would say is that the vacation rental industry is not short on data anymore. It's short on usable data, right?
Right.
So when you use data right now, you've got two different questions. One is, how did I do last month, right? How did I do yesterday? What did my bookings look like today? Those are things that are fixed. You're not going to change those things. So that doesn't help your growth. It says, how did your growth strategy work yesterday? And so when you look at this from a revenue and a strategic perspective, you want to look at the data to say, what decisions can I make today that increase the revenue that I'm going to make tomorrow, right? How do I use the data available to make those decisions? And so the biggest thing that I look at, and I think the most important thing that not enough people look at, is pacing. Right? How many bookings did I get yesterday? What was the revenue per booking? Where did those bookings come from? So what is the velocity of the booking pace? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? How is it per property? So are we ahead or behind? And does visibility make a difference, right? If more people saw my properties, would I make more money? Would my booking pace increase? That is the ultimate KPI right now for changing what tomorrow looks like.
Excellent. The other part too, I think was interesting is like the data being, lots of data being available, but it not being very good. And I've run into that problem time and time again, where it's just trash data. It's not, maybe I shouldn't say trash data. Maybe it's not dependable data, which is trash data.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, so, when you think about things like, let's talk about scaling. So when managers hit a ceiling where manual adjustments like no longer work, at what point in a company's growth does gut feeling become a liability, and how does data step in to provide that next level of scale?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I would say a gut feeling, it doesn't scale, right? And it also doesn't sell. So, at what point are you starting to talk about building a resilient business that can live on beyond you being there? Do you want to go on vacation, right? What
Right.
happens if you have a health issue? What happens if you want to sell your business, right? They will, a buyer will look at your business and say, if the owner is indispensable to that business and the buyer does not come with the business, or the seller does not come with that business, the business isn't worth as much, right?
Right.
So, uh, really being able to systematize your gut feeling, um, that's what that's what you need to be able to do, right? So at Bookings Cloud, we have this thing called an opportunity score, and what it does is it uses data to replicate a manager's kind of gut feeling on which properties are pacing ahead, which properties are pacing behind, which properties should I invest in order to get the most revenue, right? So we're going to look at like is the booking window open? If you got more people synced to see this property, is there space for them to book in their booking window? And a property that has it's worth $700 a night is more valuable because it's worth investing in versus one that's worth $100 a night, right? So automating that allows the manager to be able to hand that project off now to somebody on their team, right? So that's kind of what we do. Like we do this with housekeeping, where the owner doesn't want to be in every single clean and inspect every single clean. So you set up
Right.
systems and processes. And a lot of times with revenue, we think this is a magic almost, and we just kind of know. But because you have a lot of inputs and you just haven't figured out how to use the words to be able to explain it to somebody else. And so, yeah, if you want to sell your business, you want to take a day off, that's when gut feeling becomes a liability, and you want to start looking at this. And data will show you what's pacing ahead, what's pacing behind. Data will show you where the money is. Data will show you how you compare to your other people in your market. So just that's what you have to look at, really.
No, it makes sense. And again, I've people near and dear to me when I say things like, "Well, this is what the data's saying," and they're just like, "Oh, no, 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 that's not how it works." I'm like, all right, well, I mean, this is what the data's saying, and then I actually refer to it as the 6 month lag. It's like 6 months
Yes,
later, they're like,
absolutely.
"Did you know this?" And it's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I told you 6 months ago. You didn't listen." But it is what it is. It's funny because But then again, if you're wrong, then of course, you could always be like, "Oh, good thing you didn't listen to me." So, but fun with data, fun with data. So the interesting
Yeah.
thing I always find too, especially about the property management industry itself, a lot of shiny toys, right? I've only been in the industry for 5 years, and it's even in the 5 years that I've been in the industry, it's just like here today, gone tomorrow. There's so many different softwares and companies and gimmicks. Now you've got AI, and you got this whole AI surge, coming in, and so it's like with like the property management systems, the revenue tools available, like how do you help your partners distinguish between a shiny new toy and a technology that actually moves the needle for the specific bottom line? Like how do you pick it out?
Yeah. You want to start with the business problem, right? Like what are you trying to solve for? Um, and then you can start to look at how to solve it, right? And because sometimes technology is not like you haven't scaled enough yet, and so you can still a person is still cheaper than technology. And sometimes technology helps you run revenue or find revenue and drive that in a way that a person could never do because it's too intricate or it's too complex.
Right.
So start with a business problem for sure, right? Because a useful tool helps you make a better decision faster, and it helps you make more money faster. So is it saving you time? Is it making you money? And if it's not doing one of those two things, clearly, it's probably not urgent, right? Interesting is great, but it's not every interesting thing saves you time or makes you more revenue.
Right. No, and that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about Bookings Cloud and what it does. Like before we started the discussion, you talked a little bit about machine learning and things that you're working with. I think that it fits in within this realm, as it's really just talking about, the shiny new toy. But what you told me is not shiny or new, but putting the two together, that's
Mhm.
definitely unique. And I think that that's probably worth calling out. So maybe talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with machine learning, and how that ties back into like social media marketing.
Yeah, we're actually adapting technology and tools and best practices from the automotive industry, which sounds like not the same, right now. But functionally, what we saw was that local car dealers, right? They were having to pay autotrader.com and cars.com to get exposure for their listings. And these are high dollar listings that they need to move off the lot, but they need to get, how do you find the people who are interested in buying a vehicle, getting them, finding them locally and getting them to show up, right? Which is functionally what we're trying to do with vacation rentals, is how do we, and do that and bypass paying Auto Trader $50,000 a month, right? There's some correlations in the vacation rental side. So looking at that to say, vacation rental managers, they own the inventory. They own all the data that creates the listing, that optimizes the photos, that the pricing, everything else, keeping the calendar in check. That's something that the local vacation rental managers own. So how do we get the guests, instead of having to go through a intermediary, an OTA, how do we get them directly to the website, right? What can we do and what data is available? And now because of machine learning and because of the technology that we're able to do, we're able to automatically create these ads and make them very targeted and dynamic to guests who are looking for those properties. So if somebody wants a pool in a specific location that allows pets, Meta knows this stuff. And so we can actually train Meta's algorithms to find that person, put an ad of that property with a picture of the pool and the location they want in front of them at the price that they're looking for, because we're feeding over pricing data too. And we're sending that person directly to the property detail page on the website. So getting the people looking for the property directly in front of the property on the website, right? And then we're actually able to refine that process. So we're training Meta on a local manager's portfolio and a local manager's website, so that, hey, here's the people who actually book these properties. And we send that back to Meta, and Meta will be like, okay, we got this many responses, and now we can refine this circle of guest acquisition, to send people who want to book a specific property to the properties that meet those needs. And we're able to do that. Like, I think for one client last month, we automated the creation of 750 different individual property ads with all the data feeding into Meta to send to their website. And because they had demand on that many properties. So if you think about it, you couldn't manually do that, right? If you went to an agency or you went to your marketing manager and said, hey, I'd like you to create 750 ads that I'm just going to use this month and we're going to change them next month, they would say, are you crazy?
Yeah, I'd be like, no way.
Yes. So, right, exactly. So the data and the technology is allowing us to do something at a deeply targeted level that 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we couldn't do, right? So it wasn't as cost effective to do it a few years ago. And now it is. But still, not everybody's doing it. And some people are doing it manually. But they're not sending over as much data, right? And it's generally for properties that are doing very high value. But we're able to kind of democratize access to generating demand for these properties.
Gotcha. So is there a minimum following that you would have for a property manager's social media? I mean, is there, if my site's only got 100 followers, like is it to build their site's audience as well, or is it more to utilize what they already have?
Yeah, we don't actually even use the audiences. That would be organic social, and this is paid social. So it's two entirely different things. So we're able to,
Gotcha.
Because we're sending directly to your property websites, the actual quality of the property website matters more than anything else. So do people want to book your properties on your website, and do they trust booking on your website? And that's actually surprisingly our biggest limiting factors. We can send the people to the website. They don't always book. We have, depending on the market, 20 to 40% of the time, they will click on the link, they will go to the website, and they will book the same property on Airbnb within 30 minutes.
Got it. Yeah, totally didn't even, I was thinking like completely the opposite direction. So if it's paid, you're basically using the demographics to find the audience, and then you are posting the ads in front of the audience to bring them back. So you're growing web presence through social media. Excellent.
Yes.
That's excellent. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about pricing versus data strategy. So people often conflate dynamic pricing with data-driven growth. How do you define the difference between simply changing rates and having a holistic data-backed revenue strategy?
Pricing is RevPAR, right? This is adjusted paid occupancy times ADR. And a lot of pricing managers, revenue managers right now consider ADR something that they can impact, right? You can lower rates, you can raise rates based on demand, which is occupancy, right? But what we do is kind of reverse that premise of what if you can change demand? What if you can funnel 80% of the demand that's coming to your market? What if you can parade them by all your properties, right? So now all of a sudden your demand has shifted. So what do? It's the same as like we talk about it of like how would you change your strategy if there's a Beyonce concert in your market every night, right? You could change your rates. You could be more flexible. You would expect higher occupancy. You could, make adjustments. You would expect to make more money, right? So that's what we do here is to say, okay, we're going to drive more demand to your properties, and they are if they still have to be the right price. They still have to be listed properly. They still have to trust their vacation with you, but they're there. And so now you should be able to make more money. And so we see your booking pace increases. It now becomes a holistic situation, right? Where you get more bookings. You're ideally booking for the optimal booking window. So there's more, further out and for longer stays. And so then you see your revenue goes up. So really, you want a holistic strategy. And I think that's where marketing, like revenue management, is moving to. And like revenue strategy, it's going to be including marketing because marketing drives demand, right? And so we're able to automate marketing to drive demand, which is a revenue strategy. And so that's more and more, the more marketers use data to proactively drive demand, and the more revenue managers use marketing as part of their holistic strategy, that's where performance really blows up.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't really put two and two together when it comes to marketing equaling demand, because let's face it, they're all tangled up with the OTA concept, right? So they think that the OTAs are going to be the just constant demand or constant. It's like, no, it's not how it works, especially if, they start getting in a battle with each other. Now it's a race to the bottom, which sucks. So let's talk a little bit about market conditions, because I think, it ties back in a bit with strategy. And like you were saying, a Beyonce concert every night, right? Well, there are some markets that are similar. Nashville's probably got a lot like that. Vegas is a lot like that as well. As some other areas that are around large forums. But when we think of like the massive shifts in travel patterns over the last couple of years, like what's the one conventional wisdom about revenue management that you believe is no longer true in today's market?
If you price a property correctly, demand will find it. Really is what we're down to. As like I would say, supply used to be fewer vacation rental properties out there and available in a lot of markets. And I would say the last 5 or 6 years has really changed that, where in some markets, almost anything that could be a short-term rental has become a short-term rental. Right. So demand, the number of people looking to book your properties, has not materially increased, but the supply has. So guests have more choice. If you're looking at OTAs as that solution, when you go to an OTA, you're searching based on price. So the lowest price wins, right? So these are things that you can't just wait for guests to come to you. You really have to be able to say, who needs to see this property? And how do we help the right guest find the right property at the right time? So you're not having to cut rates, right? So that's the biggest piece is demand is not static. So do something about it and increase
Right.
visibility to your properties early.
Right. And that ties back into the next question I had, which is the human element, right? So, how do you bridge the gap between data driven strategy and the property owners who might be skeptical of lower nightly rates or experimental pricing models? That question is specific to somebody I know very well because that's exactly what he does. He's like, oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, we can't drop these weights. We can't do this. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think changing pricing without a strategy is recipe for disaster. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you deal with explaining to a property manager like this is the way we got to go?
Um, I would say it's fully trust is a major factor, right? Because data speaks and data is solid, but can't you don't always know what it means, right? And you can kind of interpret data in different ways. So that's always a risk for people, is what I would say. So one of the things that I would say for like understanding what that looks like is whoever you're talking to about data, they should be able to explain it clearly to you in a simple way that you understand, right? If they're like, "Oh, it's a black box, don't worry about all this," that's a red flag. And that's probably a point where trust goes down, right? But I'm going to say the other side of it is, quite frankly, there are some managers who, when they're resistant to change, when they're not curious, you can't change their mind. If there's a manager who has decided they don't want to do this, and they're maintaining control over their business and their company by not changing what they're doing or how they're doing it, they're not asking the question of like, what does this mean for my revenue if I would change this? If I adjusted these rates, what happens then? If you're not open to the answers of that nobody's going to change your mind, right? So
Right.
you have to be open to innovation. You have to be curious. You have to ask the questions and be brave enough to ask the questions that you're working with somebody who can answer those questions in a way that you understand. Because the other thing is interpreting data is logical, right? It makes sense. So like if you cut the grass, it's shorter, right? In no
Right.
way when you cut the grass isn't longer. And so just, but you have to ask the questions and you have to be open to that. So if we can talk to managers, first of all, like that's one of the things we do is we gauge their curiosity and their openness. And so when those managers who are open to this idea and keep their eyes on the prize of how does this impact my revenue and how does this impact my properties, when we can then explain to them that there's a strategy and a reason and a plan, it all kind of flows together.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's just a lot of people that are they have that model that worked. They made a lot of money, and they're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
wow, let's spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now it's all finger pointing at the market. And it's like, well, the market's the market. It's always going to be that way. It's going to change, but the one thing that's constantly changing is the fact that supply is still high, right? And if you don't do something, out of the box, then you're just going to kind of, roll like the debris in the ocean, right? You're just going to go up and down with the waves.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So here's something that I always find interesting because whenever I talk to property managers specifically, and it has a lot to do with the data that they started with, especially newer property managers coming in. If they're coming into their property management system, like it's their first time, usually not so bad. But it's like if they've been there for a while and because this property management systems have evolved over time as well,
Mm-hmm.
and how that property manager used their system has a unique, what I would say, of like just array of crap data all over the place. So,
Mm-hmm.
between a garbage in, garbage out scenario, what's the most common mistake you see property managers making regarding how they collect or categorize their data before it gets to the analysis stage?
Um, I would say messy data is going to give you messy answers, right?
Right.
So you really kind of want to make sure that you're taking care of it. Like one of the things that we see is, we're pulling data in from your property management software and we're assessing it. We're going to look at it all the way through. And one of the biggest things I'm going to say is your property status is not correct, right? So we'll have properties that are active, they're on the website, they're everything else, and then they go for marketing. And it's like, oh wait, that property's not active. That property shouldn't be in here. Well, there's no way for the data to know, right?
Right.
So that's actually, I call them zombie properties, right? Properties that they're there and they're there for a reason, or they're there for the owners coming off or something like that, but they don't actually they don't drive revenue for you and they're not actually really active. So understanding that, just being consistent. So consistent property status, consistent booking source is one of the other ones I would say. Is I've seen clients with 30 different booking sources, right? We don't need that many. We're probably not being consistent about it. We probably don't know what all 30 of those mean. So working through that,
right.
Data cleanliness. I think the other thing I would look at is we look at two sets of data. One is arrival date data. How much money did I make yesterday? And we're so used to that of I made this much in April, right? Well, did you book that much? You probably didn't, because you're booking, when people book is different than when people stay. And so understanding what you're looking at and really separating that. Of arrival data is going to tell you what happened, what happened, what's on the books, and how busy things are. You're not making more money with arrival data. With book data, right. How much room do I have in my calendar? What does this look like? So that's actually one of the most consistent things that we educate our clients on is the importance of booked data, of how are you pacing? How many bookings did you get on the books this month? And is it more or less than last year, right? What does that look like? And just, it all kind of mixes together for a lot of people. So understanding what you're looking at, kind of consistently defining it, and, that's going to help you price things properly. It's going to help you know how much visibility you need. And all of those things, get your categories cleaned up and lined up and talk to everybody about it, right? You want to make sure, is everybody on your team on the same page about how many direct bookings you had, last month, right? Or do you have 3 different categories for direct bookings? And do you need to clean that up, and what matters? And so that type of thing, those are the really big pieces that are in there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. When I've dabbled in a couple different companies' property management systems, and when I look in there and I see what the data is, I'm like, ooh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's some of the other thing too, is there's just not a lot of, and no disrespect to any of the property management systems out there. And I know they're changing by the day, but it's not a lot of easy reporting function to pull data. So it's almost like you're better off just dumping everything to a big file and starting from scratch. I mean, ultimately, just starting your data, data research from scratch. So there's just not a lot of reporting in there, which a lot of people don't know how to do, which is unfortunate for sure.
Yeah. And there's a ton of data. So there's a lot to look at, right? So definitely get enough to pay attention to your seasonality, get enough to pay attention to your booking pace, know when your bookings are coming in. And the rest of it takes time, but just know the first step is knowing that your data is not clean, and then start to clean it up.
Right. Yeah. And just, for listeners, if you're curious as to how that happens, it's usually because you configure your system to do something that it's not supposed to do. That's your biggest culprit on bad data, is that you say, oh, well, if I duct tape and baler twine by using this spot here and this region's drop down for this thing and that for this thing, and then I tie them all together, you're really backing yourself into a corner because you can't really get out of it. And to clean that up is, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, especially if you've been there for a couple of years.
Yeah. And people will do that and they don't write it down. And they're like, oh, I'll remember. And then somebody else goes in there and they do something else. And then you've got 3 different ad hoc, setups going on, and no way to go back and figure out why. Right.
So yeah. And that's, of course, everybody that in the audience is like, yeah, well, no kidding.
Right? Feels
Doesn't
so
help us
obvious.
now. You should have told me that 5 years
Hmm.
ago. But that's all right. There
Hmm.
is hope, you guys. There is hope. One thing that I did, this is just something I've always personally, when I was doing just data research, trying to find like competitive intelligence within, like local markets. Whether it's
Hmm.
if I'm in a big city, I want to go into neighborhoods, or if the mountains is a little bit different. I've been in the mountains for a while, so it's like determining, you know, how we are in Idaho versus how we are in Colorado, right? Like it's like at like two
Hmm.
different planets. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's Northern Rockies." It's like, no, dude. It's like Salt Lake City.
Hmm.
How Salt Lake City compared to Idaho? Well, it's not
Yeah,
apples and oranges, right?
it's not the same.
Um, so when you think about it, it's like, when you look at the internal numbers, like how heavily should a manager weigh like the local market data versus broader industry data? Like that's the tough part, because like in Idaho, I don't, you don't get the market data, right? Like I have to really put a hard press on my Airbnb rep, on my VRBO rep, and
Hmm.
push them to say, I want to know more about what's happening in the area, from where do we stand in comparison to our, they can't tell me what my competitors are doing, but they can give me data from the area and let me know how things are going, because I can't seem to get that out of the big data companies.
Yeah. My first, actually, before I answer that, where are you in Idaho?
We're in Island Park.
Okay, I'm in Boise.
Oh, you are? Okay. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know, I thought you were out
So,
east for some reason.
no, no, a lot of my team is back east, but yeah, I'm in
uh,
Boise, and so I'm very familiar with Island Park.
are you a native Boise, or are you a non-native
I'm
Boise?
a Western native, and I've been coming to Boise since I was very, very young. So
Gotcha.
my dad actually had vacation rentals up 70 miles north of Sun Valley in Stanley. And
Oh yeah.
so that's literally like I grew up in vacation rentals, and like this was hospitality, and this is what I've done for a long
Gotcha.
time. So
Gotcha. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I love that area. That's a wonderful area. Yeah,
Hmm.
so we're in Island Park. We have some in Alpine, so Western Wyoming, and
Hmm.
then a smattering around different parts of the country. But yeah, no, that's where we're at. I love Boise. It's a great town.
Perfect. Yeah.
Great town.
No,
Absolutely.
definitely some data issues out there. Yeah, with data, I think one of the things that I would say is after your first year, 90% of the data you need comes from you, right? How
Right.
did this property do this time last year? How did you do this time last year? Are you ahead or are you behind? Right? That's the first thing you want to look at. And then after that, you want to have multiple data sources. So you want to start to look and say, okay, um, I always have 2 to 3 different data sources, and you're trying to triangulate between them. How does this data look in your market? AirDNA's data for Chicago or for Boise looks radically different than the data in Island Park. And so it's not necessarily, is this data accurate, because it is, but it's different, right? And so, like, what do you see? What are you getting? Um, and how do you kind of like, how do you generally pace with that data? So you start to get an understanding of what different data sets look like. And so then you can see, right? So the first thing you want to see in like a daily conversation is, how am I doing compared to how I did last year, right? And then are you ahead or behind? And then the next question you're going to ask is it me or is it the market, right? So you want to look at your competitors. So you want to look at your local market data. And that's really helpful. But then there's also a lot of national trends that can impact things. Like, I'm going to say right now, gas prices are going to impact where people go on vacation this summer and where they drive to and what their impromptu trips are going to look like. And that's a national trend. So you do want to look at that. You want to understand like what's your level of international travelers, family travelers, all that stuff. What does a school schedule look like? So all this is all data everywhere. Like, but you kind of are like, how am I pacing to the rest of this? Is something else causing this that's outside of my control, or is there something that is causing this that I can control or impact or influence? Right. Um, like I would say Panama City Beach at one point, they had two brand new, and this was maybe 2023, two brand new extended stay hotels built on the beach. Well, that radically impacts supply, just across the
Right.
board. So now demand is the same, supply went way up, and people who had the same condo for 20 years with no updates are like, why can't I charge $300 a night? I don't understand. That's a local market condition that just kind of comes up, and you after the a bad month, it's too late to do anything about it.
Right.
So understand how that looks like. Look at it every day. Not don't just understand your check-in pace, but understand your booking pace. How many do you have, more bookings or less bookings than you did on the books this time last year? And is your booking window like shorter because people don't have more uncertainty, so they don't plan ahead? Or is it getting longer because they're excited about that multi-generational trip, and you've been able to get more visibility on those properties, right? That's a lot of different things, like the snow, radical like change on
Right.
this piece. So stay involved, like with your local community. Being involved in local groups is so important, and talking nationally to understand, like, the big thing about competitive intelligence nationally is something that worked in another market, like, can work for you too. So how do you find the things that were useful in another market because somebody else has already experienced all the things we have? And how do we, instead of like learning the hard way, let's just adapt what they've done and let's bring it to our market in our own way.
Right.
And that's that innovation and that resilience and that curiosity, that is going to be the biggest game changer between managers that have been doing it well because they've been doing it well for for 20 years, and the ones that are really going to succeed and thrive in the future.
Got it. No, that makes a ton of sense. And it's funny that we went down that part because realistically, when I think of predictive versus reactive, um, you're right. Like, oh, it's a bad month, bad month, bad month. It's like, yeah, well, it didn't have to be, right? Like, it's one of those where it's like you can look back, or at least if it's a down month, you would at least know, right? That's kind of the biggest thing, is not taking the punches one after the other.
I'm so sorry.
All of a sudden, it's just one bad month after another bad month after another bad month, and you don't have a plan to actually get to turn that around. You're just kind of going with the Airbnb flow, so to speak. But like most managers look at how they performed last month. How can they shift their workflow to use data for predictive modeling, anticipating a slump before it happens rather than reacting to it?
That is a great question. I would say again, that booking pace is kind of the gold standard for that. Did I book more nights? Did I book fewer nights? Did I book further out? How's each property doing, right? Are my top 10 properties that make me the most revenue, are they booking ahead or behind? Are my 2 bedrooms off? Are my 3 bedrooms off? So then you start looking at it by segment, and you can really start narrowing that down to specific properties that need additional views. You can start to understand of like, oh, like this is like that booking pace is really going to tell you the most of how things are going, right? And then what can you do about it? Those pricing adjustments make a big difference. I'm going to say one of the things that I would say is rearranging your photos is going to give you a good 4% bump for a couple weeks. It's not a huge bump. It doesn't last very long, but just rearrange your photos, right? Looks better. Then you can start to talk to your owners in advance to be like, hey, things are not looking good, and here's why. Here's some things you can do about it. Then you're saving your time from like angry owner conversations to maybe you get an extra owner that allows pets, right? So those are a lot of things you can do. Of course, I'm biased towards get more visibility on those properties. How do you get them out there in front of the people who want to look at them? Right. And it's talking about like you want to build enough lead time in your proactive work to respond intelligently. Google Analytics is actually, this is something revenue managers don't look at very often, is the traffic to my website going up or down? Is the traffic to my individual properties going up or down? That's going to be a leading indicator of demand is lower. Demand is a little bit different. You'll see people who switch softwares or they switch a website and their traffic plummets. and they don't notice it because they didn't think to look for it, and they didn't do
Right.
extra work to account for that change. So do it early. It's not about perfection, honestly. It's about asking a question, doing something early, and making those shifts slowly over time.
No, and that makes a ton of sense. It's just interesting because when I first started in the industry, like that lead time was an interesting predictor, right? So it was like
Hmm.
we were like, oh, lead times, the average is like 90 to 120 days, and now it's like
Hmm.
14. And it's crazy
Hmm.
because I think people are learning along the way as well. The longer they wait, right, the better the deal they're going to get as they see the revenues, the price adjustments occurring from revenue managers, lowering prices. And granted, if you're like, I mean, now I'm at the point where I don't even book wherever I travel. If I'm staying in a hotel or a short-term rental, I don't book it in advance. I wait until
Hmm.
the last minute because I know I'm going to get a better deal. So I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of buyer behavior is changing quite a bit as well. So even from last year, you might say, oh well, last year this property was booked out 120 days in advance, and you know it could be 90 now, it could be 30, depending.
Yeah, that really does depend on size and like particularity, right? People are still willing to pay more for a property that fits their needs perfectly to secure the right one. And if they don't get the right one, they'll wait till the last minute because supply is so high they know what's going to be available, right? So like when demand is high and supply is low, you can price high. Like the 4th of July. If you know everything's going to be booked, you can actually price higher, shorter, like closer to those stays. But if you know your market's not going to hit 95, 96% occupancy, you've got it. You want that booking window longer. So like, how do you adjust that size of optimal ADR for people who want the right properties and they're willing to pay a little extra for those out in advance? But the price isn't so high that they're waiting for a fire sale at the last minute.
Right.
It's a really hard strategy, and that is custom for each market
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
And it's custom for each market, each month, each weekend, right? We did see, we've got a company in Bear Lake that we work with that has these big multi-generational properties. And we were able to work with them just by getting more exposure to these properties that sleep 30, 40, 50 people. We were able to move that from 90 days to something, I think 118 days is what we got them to in the course of like 4 months. And that's what extra exposure does, is it expands that booking window for properties that people are willing to pay extra for because it fits their needs perfectly.
Well, no, that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. Well, we're almost at our end of our time, but I do want to just say, what am I not asking you? What's the question I really should be asking, and that people really should be dialed into?
Um, oh, that one is, I think, um, that's a great question. I'm going to say, like, one of the things that we're really going to have to do going forward, and this is maybe not a question necessarily, but just this idea of we're all working so hard to build these businesses, right? Out
Right.
in the local markets, um, who are employing local people and using local inventory to drive local economies, right? How do we, that's such a responsibility for every local manager, right? And so to the understand, excuse me, understanding, diversifying where you're getting that revenue from, and understanding how do you maximize those the revenue, the bookings that you get, and the business that you have in order to support this ecosystem in your community and to have something that is that you can sell later, honestly. um, that is so important. And so just really, diversification is absolutely critical, right? In where your bookings coming from, how are you maximizing the revenue per reservation? How are you adjusting? What questions are you asking to make your business more resilient going forward? And that's resiliency in the business is where the future is right now. That was a long meandering statement, I would say right now. Like, sorry.
No,
I
that's
know.
okay. No, trust me, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's but it's funny.
No.
It's always one of those things that you're right. I mean, you have to. You just gotta be ready. You gotta be ready to put the time and energy in, and you gotta dissect it. And that's something that I think people get. You know, they get a little behind the eight ball, right? Because a lot of times when you're a property manager, it's like, man, I'm just trying to keep my cleaners moving. I'm just trying to keep these properties together. You know, and then the time and energy that it takes to sit back and really do that data analysis and take a look. You know, that's why I think, you know, companies like Bookings Cloud are critical if you really want to be successful, because it's like, unless you have the time and energy and the know-how, it's really hard to do that. I mean, it really is really hard to go in and take a look and then understand that, you know, sometimes you have to go down and, you know, whittle the onion when it comes to certain properties to figure out, well, what do I need to do to make this more successful? Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a mindset shift, right? Managers don't have to have all the answers to these questions. They just have to be willing to ask questions that they don't know the answers to and dig around until they can find it. And that will make them better businesses.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Well, on that note, Amber, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate you. And everybody listening, please subscribe, like. If you're interested in anything with Bookings Cloud, how do I get a hold of you, Amber? That's the most important part.
Yes. My email address is aknight@bookingscloud.com. So bookings with an S, cloud.com. And our website is bookingscloud.com. So please reach out.
Excellent. Well, folks, don't be afraid. Reach out to Amber. She can definitely help you guys along the way. Thanks again for coming, and appreciate it. And everybody have a great day.
Welcome y'all to the VRNation station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation. VRNation station, tune in and feel the thrill.